Right, so we are right at 3 p.m. We're going to start the webinar now. So good day and welcome everyone to the IATA Asia Pacific Digital Cargo Webinar 2022. My name is David Wee and will be the host for this webinar. I would like to first thank all of you for taking time off your busy schedule to join this webinar today. COVID-19 has a tremendous impact on the way we work, remote working becoming the preferred mode of working for many people, and we see many businesses employing technology to make remote working more efficient. Well, a good example is the use of video conferencing, such as Microsoft Teams or Zoom, which ballooned during the pandemic. Also, many consumers turn to online shopping more than ever during the pandemic and continue to do so even with the easing of COVID. And more businesses are now looking at improving hygiene through the introduction of contactless technology due to the demand from either their employee or consumer. So some of this behavior will stay with us for the long term. And what is very certain is the drive for automation and digitalization will continue to make our product and services more efficient in cost and productivity. For a sector which the core value of is speed, the air freight industry considerably lacks when it comes to visibility, agility, and ease of operations. So in the Asia Pacific region, we generally see a very diverse digital adoption landscape. Different countries are adopting digitalizations at different speed. Without conformity and standardizations, we will not be able to reap the full benefit of cost savings and efficiency for new technology investment. So in today's webinar, we are going to share with you new digital standards, innovations, and solutions developed by IATA and our industrial experts to help all of us accelerate the digital adoption in your company and country. So I would like to first start off with our introduction of our guest speaker. We have the honor to invite Mr. Tang Jia-T, the head of product delivery from CCN, to speak on the webinar today. Jia-T is currently head of product delivery in CCN. His role includes conceptualizing, delivering, and managing apps and services to the CCN global communities. In his role, he is also involved in the long-term strategic planning and development of the CCN platform. He has more than 20 years of experience in the air cargo industry. So prior to joining CCN, he has spent a decade with a major airline, driving key changes relating to digitization. So thank you, Jia-T, turning on your screen and saying hello. So we will just hold on a minute where I go through a few more admin slides, and then we will leave it to you to probably give your presentation. Thank you. Right, so continuing on, I would like to draw your attention to the competition law guideline. This webinar is being conducted in full compliance with antitrust and competition law. So discussion on pricing, charging mechanism, allocating markets, customers, suppliers, or agents are prohibited. Right, the digital cargo webinar is conducted over 2 sessions. So today is the first day of the webinar, and we will have another session next Wednesday at the same time. So the latest agenda is shown on the slide. I do want to draw your attention to the Q&A session. We will have 2 Q&A sessions, one session in the middle and the other at the end of the presentation. Your microphone and video will be switched off during the presentations, and we will turn them on only during the Q&A sessions. So please also take note that the session will be recorded. So coming up next, I'm going to give you an update on the Asia Pacific region. So we live in turbulent times. The world today is facing two major crises, the climate change and the COVID pandemic. And we're further weighed down by the war in Ukraine and higher oil prices. On the positive sides of things, consumers switched more to goods over services during the COVID pandemic. And the increased cargo revenue have supported the airlines greatly to reduce their losses. Following the easing of travel restrictions, there is a very strong pent-up demand in air travel. So it is quite heartening to see airlines continuing to evolve and develop a new business model to stay relevant and viable despite a very quick and fast-changing business environment, especially during the onset and easing of COVID. Some airlines are rebalancing their priorities to focus on more on cargo. One interesting fact is, there are actually more airlines born and fewer airlines being closed or going dormant in 2021 than in 2019. Right. On the other hand, many airlines are still burdened by high level of debts and are now facing higher labor costs and oil prices. So there are also more costs coming from climate change. Governments around the world are imposing carbon emission reduction targets and even tax in some regions. And last but not least, the geopolitical conflicts affecting the prosperity of air travel and cargo with the closure of airspace and the introduction of trade sanctions. But the air travel industry recovery is definitely underway and largely influenced by two factors. The ease of travel restrictions and pent-up travel demand. So we tend to see a cyclical swing of travel demand following very closely with the travel restriction. Cargo, however, was very much protected by the lesser exposure to travel restriction, being able to operate freighters or all cargo packs aircraft, also widely known as prem freighters, to make up for the loss of at least the pandemic. We are seeing international travel returning to pre-COVID days. Asia Pacific continue to be the lowest performing region in the area. Asia Pacific lagged the rest of the region due to the closed borders, while the rest of the world has generally eased all the travel restriction previously imposed. But quite fortunately, we have been seeing more borders reopening in the last 1 to 2 months in the region. So Asia Pacific passenger travel recovery is underway with the reopening of borders as mentioned. While we start to see cargo tonnage kilometer CDK continue to slide downwards even into the month of May, where we see 8.1% against 2019, the pre-COVID levels. With the main contributing factors of lockdown imposed in China due to Omicron wave, and I think even in June, where the China has eased lockdown, it seems like the CDK has not fully resumed to the level. And I think it will take a while for the gradual resumption. All right. Coming up next, we will have Hank Muller. Sorry. Yeah, coming up next, we will have Hank Muller, our head of digital cargo, to provide you an overview of the digital cargo development. Hank, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this workshop. One of those big changes. In the past, we would have flown over and meet you all in person, and now we're so used to doing this that we are happy to participate. And my whole team is here as well, and I'll be presenting. I'm going to be sharing my screen if I can. Okay, so. All right, so as you said, my name is Hank Mulder. I'm the head of digital cargo at IATA in one of our head offices in Geneva. And in this short session, I would like to give you an overview of what's happening in digital cargo. And I'll start with explaining exactly what we mean by that. And so very often when we participate in these meetings and other meetings, We get questions, well, what's all this for? Why do we need to do this? What's wrong with the way we're doing business today on a digital side? And so I'd like to show you a few examples of some developments that have been taking place recently, in particular during the hackathons that we organize, where we invite participants and companies to join on an on-site live event, or off-site for that matter. Sometimes they're online meetings as well. And just to innovate in a very short time using modern digital standards. And so I'll go through a number of examples, and that will give you a flavor of what we really mean by digital cargo compared to what happened before, and I will talk about that as well. So the first example I give you, this was developed during a hackathon last year, and this was a group of people that decided to come up with a tracking app for a mobile device for multimodal transport. Okay, and you can see here in the diagram, this is a transport from Shanghai. I believe it concerned the shipment of a computer, of a set of computers, laptops from Shanghai. You see there's warehousing, there's road transport, there is maritime shipping, and then there is the fact that this is e-commerce, and so it gets stocked into a warehouse in Europe, in this case, in Belgium, and then there's an order, and this device gets shipped to Spain. And you can see that the overall complexity. This is a big change from how we do business in the airline world today, where most of our focus is on the interaction between airlines and their customers, their direct customers, the forwarders, with a little bit of exposure to shippers, but mostly it's between airlines and forwarders. And so the digital environment allows us to cross all of these boundaries, and that, of course, then requires also cooperation between the various transport modes, which is something that we develop as we develop the digital standards. Another example is the use of tracking devices. In this case, we're using 2D barcodes with a mobile phone, and of course, this is something that we see increasingly happening in our business. But what's interesting is that the use of some of these modern standards give us a lot more than just perhaps the reference to the shipment. It can provide us all the details about the shipper, the forwarder, the destination, whether something is cleared or not, and all of these things are now accessible using digital standards that we have developed. And again, this is something that is relatively new. It's happening increasingly, but on a bilateral basis. But with these new standards, we can do this also on a global and a multilateral basis, including, as I said before, crossing into other transport modes and giving full visibility. Another example of what happens with these new digital standards is that we are capable of putting together far more rich and complex, but that's not the objective, but far more intricate networks of data. In the traditional business model, we send messages via message service providers, but in the digital environment with the current standards that we have developed, in the example here, we can see that there's an airline involved, Air France, there's a maritime shipping company, Maersk, there's CMA CGM, there's MSC, another shipping company. And you can see that using these digital exchanges and APIs, we can compose very, very rich networks of data that we can then use to develop rich applications and rich business models. This goes further. We can start looking at our business in a different way. For example, here was one of the participants in a hackathon that created a logistics event hub where we would be able to, or where we are able, because this is a live system, to get insight into the events that are happening across the industry, hosted by companies themselves. So again, no need to go through third-party service providers, but have direct exchange between the various companies that are involved in such transport. And these things are only possible if we use digital standards with digital architectures. So there's a lot of opportunity that has been created by the development of some of these digital standards. Here's another very typical example of the developments that we have seen in the past few years. In this case, I believe it's a salmon transport, salmon from the North Atlantic, which goes through Finland and then gets transported to Japan. And in this case, not only is the actual shipment tracked with all the details that comes with it, but also the CO2 production, as well as tracking the temperature. That's a very, very typical application of some of these new standards that exist, where we can mix and match data from different sources and present it in a way that's extremely useful, both for the customer as well as for the operators that are doing this transport. Then the last example is a good example of innovation that comes from these new digital standards. So in this case, this was at our last hackathon that we organized in Amsterdam. We'll go on coming up, and we'll hear about it a little bit later. But in this case, it was a group of developers, not quite a startup, but they could be a startup, but they may be a startup one day, but a group of developers that use these new standards, that use the APIs that were provided by, in this case, maritime shipping and air transport, to come up with a new model for managing containers across the globe, dealing with issues like having sites where there is a shortage of containers and ULDs, and sites where there's a surplus. And so that whole process was implemented in a very short time using these new standards. And it's a good example of the sort of innovation that you get if you use digital standards compared to the limited possibilities of the past. One question I'd like to address, and David, you already alluded to some of this, but if we look at digitalization in air cargo and put it into context of where we are, why is this important now? You could argue it was always important, but things have changed. And in this chart here, I'm showing the stock price of a major e-commerce provider in North America. And what you can see very clearly are this kind of shows how the digital economy has evolved. Up to the year 2008, there wasn't that much activity. There was activity, but this is what I refer to as the electronic era, where we exchange documents using electronic means. From 2009, more or less, the activity increased significantly. And this is the area which I refer as digital era, not because in air transport we use digital technologies, because we haven't really done it that much, but in other parts of the economy, digital technology has boomed significantly. And in fact, there's a quote there on top that says by 2025, a quarter of the global economy will be digital, compared to 15.5% a few years ago. Well, this is evident that some industries, like, for example, media and communications, the fact that we're using a Teams call is a good example of this, are already 100% digital, and other areas are lagging significantly, with air transport being somewhere in the middle. What's really interesting here is that last chunk there that you can see. COVID-19 significantly increased the use of e-commerce. I've drawn a sort of a trend line that ignores that, and you can see the significant increase in this particular case. This may be a stock price, but that represents the value that this digital company provides. And what has happened in that period, and David mentioned some of the reasons why digitalization is important. What we're looking at here is a tremendous economic opportunity that was created that requires 100% digitalization. And although the numbers have gone down, which indicates in a way that the world is going back to normal, although David pointed out the number of issues that we're dealing with, we have all learned, our airlines and our customers have learned, that the digital opportunity is real. It's not just that it sounds good or may look good, that we're looking for quality, etc., etc. There's an economic opportunity which has been evidenced during this period. So let me maybe explain a little bit about what it is that we do in IATA in a digital cargo team. We have, I'll go from left to right and I'll walk you through this. We're involved in governance of standards, and for that we have a board that's called the COTB, or the Cargo Operations Technology Board, and there are senior executives from airlines that keep a good eye on what is happening around the world and what is being developed within the IATA framework, and they steer and guide and approve new standards. We have working groups that do further development. So we have a one record working group, and we'll hear a lot more about that a little bit later from my colleagues David and Christoph. We also manage the messaging standards, in particular cargo XML, which I often refer to as legacy standards. But of course, I realize that this is still the flavor of the month in the current environment, even though I'm pretty sure that soon we'll all be talking digital rather than messaging. We have interactive cargo standards, which are managed by the Interactive Cargo Working Group, and we hear about this also from Ildiko, my colleague, who'll be speaking later. We're running lots of pilots around the world. Some significant number are testing the One Record digital standards and the interactive cargo pilots, and we'll hear about that as well. We have another group which is essentially providing a liaison between the CCS and IATA. CCS and not airlines, but we create a separate group, which is the Digital Connectivity Working Group, which makes sure that not only does the digital standards evolve for the industry, that they're also compatible and usable and used by the solution providers that support the air cargo business. We have some other things. For example, we have the Cargo Advisory Council. I mention them specifically because this is a group of CEOs of the airlines, the most important airlines, that provide us with an executive view of what are the priorities in the industry, where are the issues, and this is very important for us to understand so we can make sure that we prioritize our work correctly. We organize a number of events that you may or may not know. We have the World Cargo Symposium, which is going to be in London this year. That's a very big event, more than 1,000 people typically, and we have a major presence there from a digital perspective. We traditionally also have digital cargo webinars that used to be called the Digital Cargo Conference in the good old days when we did face-to-face meetings, but currently they are still online. And then lastly, we have some extremely popular and successful hackathons. We're now on our 5th, organizing the 6th, and we're doing 2 a year now. They are highly productive, highly inspiring, and I look forward to seeing you there if you can make it to one of them. Next one is a bit far away from you. It's in Toronto, but then we're coming back to Europe, and then after that we're going east. So this is coming your way as well, fortunately. We do a lot of work with third-party government stakeholders. Some of them you know well, like FIATA, ICAO, you know well as well. You may have heard of UNECE. They're the ones that are behind the UN CFACT standards. And we do a lot of work with the European Commission and the US DHS we're also in contact with. There's a DT11 there that you may not have heard of. This is a European Digital Transport and Logistics Forum. And this is particularly important because they allow us to do a lot of development around the multimodal integration of freight using interoperable digital standards. So that is a very, very active group that is more or less influencing freight and digital freight around the world. Lastly, and we'll hear a lot more about that tomorrow, are products and services. My team here, we get involved in these because we develop new standards, and then based on that, we come up with new products and services in order to support the industry. So these are all of the activities that we are working on. And then, of course, we have our colleagues in the regions, including David, who help us liaising with the regions and making sure that all of these things are relevant for you and that we can work with you in developing this. I would like to, I can change the slide, say a few words about One Record. We have a separate session on that, so this is going to be very high level, but really just an introduction. And digital cargo in general we have this view, this vision, this objective to create an end-to-end digital logistics supply chain. And the idea here is that we need to shift from moving information in messages or documents into a network of data that is essentially connecting the full ecosystem of cargo and air cargo around the world. And this involves stakeholders like yourself, it involves communities, and it involves data platforms. And that's very much what is driving the current activities that we have. So one program in particular that I'll mention is the One Record. We sometimes refer to as the Internet of Logistics, where we consider that all logistics partners can connect directly with each other, no intermediaries, no intermediary formats, direct data exchange using modern standards. In fact, they're not that modern because we use the internet standards, which are already more than 30 years old now. In fact, the internet standards are much older than that, but the web standards that we use are now 30 years old, very mature. And so in this diagram shows that we really would like to be able to connect directly between any of these parties so that if anything happens, each party can check with the other what the status of the freight is without the need to wait for sequential message information to be trickled down a serial process. We'll hear a little bit more about it later as well. So just to put this into context, what you're seeing here is the current environment, which is all messaging based. And although there's a big red cross through it, I realize that 99% of our business still does this. Okay, so it's not like it doesn't exist. It's that we need to move beyond this. The issue with the messaging approach is that it's sequential. So if you look at the example here, if something happens upstream, it doesn't mean that downstream people are aware of it, or the opposite. If something happens downstream the process, there's no guarantee that upstream partners are updated on that. So we essentially turn this whole thing on its head and we connect everything directly together. And instead of having information that is being shared between parties, we have all information available into a distributed shipment record or a virtual shipment record, or however you want to call it. We call it One Record, and that essentially connects all of the information. This transition from messaging to One Record is the same as from email to the world that we live in today, where everything is connected. Okay, it's exactly the same transition, and I don't have to tell you that email is something that was a great tool 20 years ago. Today we try and avoid it because it's just too painful, and we use all sorts of other platforms for exchanging information. And the same is happening and will continue to happen on the air cargo side. Just an update on really what this is driving. On one hand, we're looking at direct connectivity, no intermediaries. That doesn't mean that there is no role for intermediaries because somebody has to provide the technology, but the actual connectivity is direct. Okay, so in the same way that we're using a Teams tool, it still allows us to have a direct data exchange, direct information exchange with me and you, even though we're not in the same place. So One Record does the same thing. The second thing that it does, and this is a very high value, is it gives data access and visibility to all parties. So it's almost like I've taken the airline here as the focal point. The airline has direct visibility of what's happening at the shipper, the forwarder, the customs, the handler, etc., on all sides of the process. But I could have taken customs and put customs in the center, and they will have visibility of all the other parties. So this is a tremendous improvement in providing us with the data that we need to manage our business correctly. And this can only work because we're using these distributed data via these direct connected networks. Another effect that this has is it actually drives digital transformation. I've shown a few dominoes here. If you look carefully, you can see that there's lots of areas like airport hubs. I see perishables, customs, and each of these areas is slowly but surely being triggered into digital transformation. And this is important because we have such a big and complex industry that you can't change it all at once. But we're seeing that the dominoes are falling, and before long, we'll have moved from a traditional messaging environment to a fully connected digital environment. In terms of the One Record global deployment, what you can see here is where the activity is. I will start by saying that this particular version of Excel, I don't know why this is the case, you probably know more than I do, doesn't actually show Singapore. And we have a lot of activity in Singapore, so there should be a bright blue dot there. Okay, so my apologies for that. This is a limitation of Excel. However, what we do see here is that in Europe, if I were to blow it up, you'd see a lot more blue. Most of the work is being done in Europe with a strong focus on Germany, which is a logistics hub within the EU as well. A lot of activity in North America, and currently China has started its work about a year ago and is coming on board very rapidly in implementing the One Record standards. And then if you look carefully, you would see there's sort of this whole global trade lanes. You could superimpose them and see where things are. In terms of the user groups, I see that I'm running out of time. That's good. I only have 2 slides left. You can see here the parties that are participating in using these standards. Of course, airlines, they have the highest usage here, and then IT providers, fortunately, they're all coming on board. Freight forwarders, you would expect to see those. But you also see customs, you see trucking, you see other parties. You also see the color schemes here are the sort of progression in time. For the airlines is an exponential uptake. The IT providers have always been there, and we see this increasing uptake across these various stakeholder groups. Then lastly, in terms of what are the use cases that we are seeing implemented, very rich environment. Airport hubs are the #1 application. Truck and road, tracking devices, customs, pharma, etc. I won't go through the list, but what you can see mostly is that it's a very broad application of one standard into all of these areas. And with that, I thank you very much, and I hand the floor back to David. Thank you, David.
Well, thank you, Hank, for the insightful sharing. So coming up next, we will have our guest speaker, Jati, Head of Product Delivery CCN, to present you on the importance of data collaboration and how the CCN Cube platform can support this. So Jati, please take control and feel free to present.
Okay. Thank you, David, for the introduction earlier. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me just pull up my slide. Okay, so today I'm sharing my perspective on enabling deeper data collaboration at the air cargo community. So by deeper data collaboration, I actually focus on enhancing the everyday collaborations that we are already doing in the air cargo community, such as like shipper sending shipper instructions to freight forwarder via email. It's a form of collaboration, which is currently being practiced everywhere. And we want to see how can we make this more seamless and easier for the participants. Another example could be freight forwarder calling the carrier for quotes and then making a booking via carrier website or booking portal. This is also collaboration that we focus on. Yeah. So to me, a deeper collaboration, data collaboration, would really mean a seamless flow of data across relevant stakeholders, across different apps and services. The flow can be triggered when I'm doing some transactions, and whoever I intend to collaborate with, whether upstream or downstream, will pick the data up for subsequent activities, or without me doing anything like explicitly sending out an email or making a call direct to the person involved to share this data. Of course, we need to put in all the necessary authorizations and controls, and we feel that an ecosystem that enables this will be very beneficial to all in the industry. So if you were to remember just one thing from my presentation today, right? This is the one key takeaway that I would like you to remember. An open data platform that facilitates collaboration will benefit all stakeholders. And this includes all the stakeholders in the shipment chain of activities, from shippers, agents, airlines, ground handling agents, customs, and all the way to consignees. Service providers that offer apps and services on the platform would also gain from the ability to cross-read data and cross-use data across their users and also across other apps or services. The caveat here, though, is that this cannot be a platform where anyone can just come in and grab data from anyone or anywhere. There must be controls, security controls, and privacy controls that put in place. And of course, whatever data that shared must be authorized by the data owner. So let me present the case for such a platform in the following slides. At CCN, we have more than 16,000 users spread over many cities globally. Our connectivity also includes hundreds of airlines, tens of ground handling agents, and also include 50 customs jurisdiction. Our user profile is wide, so ranging from SMEs to MNCs, and so is the range of services that we offer. Some users can be just using our connectivity options. Others could be using our airbill management, rates management, customs filing, CIQ, billing recon. So many services that our current users are already using. And when we offer all these services to our users, we are already doing data collaboration among the services that CCN provides. And even then, we talk regularly with our customers. And a common thread from this conversation is that the question they always ask is there a possibility of extending this data collaboration to my partners, to other users who might not be using CCN hubs, CCN services, and whether they can actually also share this data to other services and other apps. So from all this conversation, we see that there's really a wish for a deeper data collaboration here. And if we look at the present state of industry, right, like what Hank and David has alluded to, there's really a shift in the global trade flows from all the geopolitical events, COVID disruptions in the last few years. So, and there is a need to reconfigure the supply chains, constant need, and really the industry needs to be more efficient and resilient in handling all these disruptions. Digital transformation and collaboration will be key in capitalizing on these opportunities and responding to threats arising from all these trends. And for collaboration on opportunities, you need all parties to be digitally capable. And all parties, even the capable, must be willing to collaborate. So the question would be, are we ready for deeper collaboration? So we get anecdotal remarks from our users that the level of data collaboration is low. This is what Hank also has mentioned just in his presentation. Digitization in air cargo is lagging other industry. Yeah, and stakeholders have different digital readiness. I think whether due to cost barrier or user resistance or just protectionism over their information. And even app providers, they also may not be forthcoming in collaborating with one another. And it usually ends up with users using different apps that are in silos. Yeah. So the air cargo the air cargo process is also complex to start out. For example, each shipment has more than 30 documents. This is from a picture that is picked up from IATA e-freight handbook. And even with all these documents, not many are being digitized currently. So with all these paper documents still manually being transferred around, the repeated manual entry of the same set of data at each stage of the shipment cycle will just lead to more errors and inefficiencies. And even now, this more stringent and increasing stringent security regulations imposed by different customs really adds on to the complexities. And even if there is a will to collaborate among the different stakeholders, many of the process change may not be so straightforward. It may involve multiple stakeholders and services, and this may need to be orchestrated by some party, which is often challenging. So, however, if we can find some way to facilitate mass digitization and hence promote collaboration, There are opportunities to simplify business model, as well as a reconfigure business model to reap the benefits. So we see end-to-end digitization is really a must, and it will be most impactful when there are digitalization and data sharing. And we see the critical need to enable mass digital capabilities, not just building digital capabilities for certain segments of our customers, but really a mass enabling of digital capabilities so as to level up the entire air freight community, including MNCs, SMEs, and even the small setups, and by lowering the barrier of innovation adoption. And the key is entire community must collaborate. And if you look at just the shipment visibility as an example, we only get full visibility if the entire community collaborates. Otherwise, we'll have gaps in part of the shipment cycle as this picture shows here. So how can we start? We can start with platform can provide basic tools. Start off with easing user in sharing and collaborating with anyone, anytime. Allow them to create sharing rules for auto sharing within groups, and these groups need not be restricted to just the internal parties to the organization, can be including external parties. For example, an agent can configure to have a FWB. Once it's generated by an app that he uses, it can be shared with the export team, colleagues, the finance team within the organizations, as well as to outside partners, including shipper, carrier, ground handling agents. These shares can be rule-based. It can happen seamlessly without the user taking explicit action for each and every transaction. For example, the agent can configure and set the rule to say that whenever he cuts a waybill, that's with origin, Sing, destination Bangkok, to share with the ground handling agent in Singapore, as well as the partner agent in Bangkok, respectively. So it all happens in the background. And if we expand this concept and scale up to multiple users and multiple apps and services, it can create an ecosystem where all stakeholders share data and collaborate effectively through the platform. Public data sets like flight schedule and publish rate can be made easily available. And when shippers, traders make booking and digit declarations, for example, on the platform, the data gets shared to the freight forwarder. The apps that the freight forwarder use, for example, airline booking, trade permit application, the airwaybill application, can then pick up this data and reuse them. And then the documents generated from these apps in turn get shared with the airline and so on. And all the shipment transaction record or the data can be linked up to form an integrated shipment record for each user. And be also mindful that data flow can go either way, downstream or upstream. Although illustrated here, I've just illustrated with this diagram, it does seem that it only flows downstream to the downstream parties. But the data can flow either way, and it can even flow direct from shipper to airlines and airlines to the customs without the need to go through an intermediary. So it's really a distributed data system and direct access for such a platform. So the open data platform, we can see that is really an enabler for mass digitalization, encourages mass participation, truly collaborative, with data as source, facilitates data sharing, and maintains data integrity. And any provider, big or small, can offer solutions leveraging on the available data set and user, enabling mass digitalization opportunities at low cost. And the platform can promote the mass adoption of these solutions through strategic marketing and incentive directly to the users. And most importantly, it facilitates the collaboration through cross-service and cross-apps. We will open up possibilities with such a platform. Firstly, there will be greater efficiencies across the entire community through digitalization and collaboration. Network effect among users, data, and service creates a vibrant and innovative ecosystems. And innovations through data and user collaborations present new value propositions to enhance air cargo mode in lanes. For example, greater demand for air due to lower complexities and costs, intermodal possibilities, and in forward customs clearance enabling. On greater resiliency, they enable eco players with new capabilities to adapt to business model change and the possibility of creating new roles and business opportunities. An example could be data sharing among freight forwarders for truck sharing and optimization between all the freight forwarders. Capabilities in handling disruptions robustly, and an example would be a total shipment visibility with predictive capabilities so as to be able to plan ahead for disruptions. Let's look at some possible use case with such an open data platform as an infrastructure. Cargo insurance. Collaboration between an insurance broker service and booking service can potentially change the way how insurance is purchased. Currently, forwarders purchasing insurance on behalf of shipper either fall back on an annual negotiated contract or manual quotes with response time in hours or even up to days. So with this collaboration between an insurance broker service and a booking service, user can request for per shipment insurance quotation based on actual value and needs and ensure the shipment instantly at the same time when the freight booking is made. An insurance broker service connected to multiple insurers can also leverage on AI machine learning to route to specific insurers that offer the most competitive rates based on the shipping profile. So we can see potential key benefits. We have freight forwarders enjoying a lower insurance premium, which gets passed on to shippers. Booking information can be auto-populated. Insurance quote get in real time, saving time for both the forwarders and the shippers. And as a result, forwarders can provide a higher level of service to their shippers. Insurance data can also potentially be extended to analytics and monitoring tools, contributing to the total shipment visibility. Dangerous goods. The open data platform will allow users, whether shippers, freight forwarders, or DG specialists, depending who makes the DG declarations, to actually use the booking and shippers and reuse shippers and forwarder data and collaborate easily with partners across the shipment chain. And may also be opportunities for an ICR service to scan in manual declarations and facilitate data sharing downstream on the platform. Benefits can include reduce errors due to manual entries, reduce fines, penalties, faster processing time during cargo acceptance. Cross-border for forwarder custom clearance. Open data platform allows origin and destination forwarders to share cross-border shipment information, facilitate customs reporting without the need to repeatedly key in the same set of information through data reuse. Collaboration is usually bidirectional, simple in concept. I think the key challenge is getting parties to collaborate. However, once the parties get onboarded and with a common data model, this can be scaled up easily to multi-lanes collaborations. Benefits will increase shipment data accuracy, quicker customs clearance, reduce manual corrections, reduce custom compounds. Lastly, sustainability dashboard can make use of the integrated shipment record data on the open data platform to compute and display carbon emissions to all community users. In addition, the carbon emissions can be displayed on all shipment itinerary options for users to make informed choice when making booking, if it's integrated with the booking service. The key benefits will include increased carbon awareness, informed choices for booking, potential availability of offset service providers coming on board the platform, as well as potential as using this data as reference data for carbon tax computation and other regulatory requirements. many other exciting possibilities which can be opened up by platform participants. So this is the end of my presentation. I hope if you can find this sharing of our perspective useful. Just want to end with this note, and we at CCN are working towards making this a reality. And so watch this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Jiaqi, for the insightful sharing. We will now actually move on to the first Q&A session, where you're free to type in your questions in the Q&A panel or raise them verbally. Please use the raise hand button if you like to speak, and we'll turn on your microphone and video speaker. But to enable a better flow, we will give priority to people asking questions verbally. So we'll have 5 minutes. Feel free to ask any questions that you want. We seem to have a very, very quiet crowd today. Right, so I guess the presentations are very clear. We don't have any questions at this point of time. And what we're going to do is we're going to move on next to, just hang on. I have a minor question. I wouldn't say a minor question, but I have a question from Inaba-san. Will we be sharing the slide after the session? Yes, we will, as well as the recording. So with no further questions, I think we will move on to the next presentation. So coming up next, we will have, I hope I get the name right, Idiko Mache, Project Manager, Digital Cargo, to share with you the interactive cargo standards and solutions that has been developed using the standards and the future developments. Off to you, Idiko.
Hi. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks a lot for the introduction. David, yes, you hopefully get my name correctly. It is Ildiko. So I'm gonna just share my slides. Okay, so again, my name is Ildiko. I'm a project manager in the digital cargo team, and I'm in charge of the interactive cargo project. So today I am going to introduce you to this project by walking you through the challenges the interactive cargo project is aiming to address, sharing with you the vision, the objectives, and the scope of the project, a summary of the accomplishments so far, what are the exact work packages that we are dealing with at the moment, and a few insights on the timelines. So the air cargo supply chain encounters multiple challenges, but today I'm going to focus only on those challenges which we would be able to address by the digital solutions. So as it has been already mentioned, there is still a lack of end-to-end visibility in the supply chain. There is also an increasing demand for real-time information from different stakeholders. There are a lot of shipments which would require special conditions during the whole supply chain. And this can also result in a very big time pressure. When something goes wrong, there is a very limited time to act. And because of all these reasons, even very small inaccuracies can result in a very high cost. So The vision of the Interactive Cargo project is to equip airlines and the air cargo supply chain with responsive air cargo services based on intelligent systems that would enable the players to self-monitor, send real-time alerts, respond to the deviations quickly to meet the customer expectations, and report on the cargo journey. So in one short sentence, we could say that the vision of the project is making cargo talk. The goal of the Interactive Cargo initiative is to provide the stakeholders of the air cargo supply chain with a set of standards, guidance documents that would enable and facilitate the use of IoT devices for interaction with cargo. This would enable the stakeholders to have an increased visibility. It could support them to improve their processes. They would be able to capitalize on their resources. They could minimize the spoilage. They would be able to shorten the reaction time by having the correct data at the correct time. So as I mentioned, the project has started already like 2 years ago. So there have been several achievements that I would like to summarize to you. So there was a policy paper published, which was endorsed by the Cargo Services Conference in March 2021. There has been some work done on the recommended practices regarding cargo interactivity. There were some amendments made to the recommended practice on the conditions of carriage for cargo. This has been adopted by the CSC in March 2021. And 2 new recommended practices have been published. One of them is on the approval of portable electronic devices for air cargo. And the other one is IoT device data sharing in air cargo. Both of these recommended practices have been also adopted by the CFC in March 2021. 7 pilot projects have been defined involving around 20 companies. And I'm going to share a few insights about this. Then the IATA Cargo Handling Manual was also updated to reflect some insights on cargo interactivity. And as Hank already mentioned, there have been several events organized to promote the Interactive Cargo project, including digital cargo webinars, the IATA Cargo Hackathon, and the World Cargo Symposium. The scope of the Interactive Cargo project includes the planning, the development, the testing, the deployment, and the promotion of standards and guidelines for interactivity and connected devices. During the work of this project, we are focusing on pilot projects. We are working on updating and improving the existing recommended practices. We are working on identifying the need for standard operating procedures and publishing them. We are also working on 2 new products, which I'm going to introduce to you a little bit more in detail later. One of them is a central database for airline-approved tracking devices for cargo. And the second product is a pre-validation service for PAD devices. And we are in continuous discussion within the Interactive Cargo working group to identify additional business needs connected to cargo interactivity. So at the moment, we have 4 work packages. We are working on pilots. We are working on recommended practices and standard operating procedures. We are working on the central database and the cargo tracking device pre-validation process. So now let me go a little bit into detail on all of these work packages. So regarding the pilots, 7 use cases have been defined, and the pilot projects have been started in 2021 with the objective to test, confirm, and adopt the recommended practices, to trial the use of devices for tracking shipments, to provide end-to-end visibility through the whole supply chain, to test real-time tracking and monitoring, and also to assess the use of the one record data model and data sharing in cargo interactivity. So far, we have some positive and some less positive learnings. So on the positive side, I would like to highlight that there is a really tangible impact of digitalization on the supply chain logistics. There is so the location tracking, monitoring the circumstances, and sharing the correct information at the correct time is really having a positive impact on the air cargo supply chain. On the other hand, we have also identified certain challenges, which we could group into three big areas. One is the general market approach, some technical challenges, and also the general market conditions. Here I mean mainly the pandemic situation that unfortunately resulted in many companies restricting their budgets and maybe deprioritizing digitalization projects as they do not have resources available. Also here, I would like to draw your attention that we are always working on defining additional use cases for pilots. So in case you have an idea which is connected to cargo interactivity, I would like to ask you to please contact us at interactivecargo@iata.org email address, and then we can discuss and define the details of your test idea. Let me also go into a little bit more detail on two pilots that were run in the Asia Pacific region. So one of them was in cooperation with the Cathay Pacific. This was real-time cargo tracking for shipments requiring special handling. So here the objective was to track the shipment requiring special handling using Bluetooth technology, tags and sensors, in order to capture real-time geolocation and the conditions of the shipment during the journey, such as the temperature and the humidity. And to display this data in the carrier's platform and connect with the supply chain stakeholders using one record. The results are very positive. Cathay Pacific implemented the use of tracking devices in real shipments, which are also flying in their network, and they are tracking location and temperature and also additional attributes. And they have piloted the connection to their customers using the One Record API. Another pilot in the region was run by Singapore Airlines, and it was focused on the approval of the use of portable electronic devices for air cargo. Here the objective was to adopt the recommended practice which was published by IATA regarding the approval of tracking devices on board. And the aim was to understand whether the recommended practice would be able to support the carrier to make the approval process simpler and faster. The result here is also really positive. The airline confirmed that they were able to shorten the device approval process by the use of this recommended practice. The second big work item is the recommended practices and standard operating procedures. So here we are reviewing the existing recommended practices and doing a gap analysis in order to understand whether we need to fine-tune these recommended practices. And we are also working on defining standard operating procedures for cargo interactivity, which would be then included in the IATA Cargo Handling Manual. Then let me introduce you to the two products which I have briefly mentioned. So the first one is the central database for airline approved tracking devices. So the concept here is to create a comprehensive directory of approved devices and contacts using the IATA platform OneSource. It would be very beneficial for the industry, as this database would provide a centralized source of information for the relevant stakeholders. So by having the different contacts here, the device manufacturers would have a very easy job by understanding to whom they need to addressed when they would like to get devices approved. And for the shippers and freight forwarders, it would be also a very big help, as they would be able to identify which airlines have approved which types of devices. So when they are planning shipments, it would make their work much simpler and easier. Then let me go to the next product, which is the device pre-validation process. Here, the concept is to define a procedure which would simplify and shorten the approval process by including independent validators. So what we would like to propose to the market is also to use the one-source platform and provide a solution whereby the device manufacturers would be able to submit all the requested documents remotely. Then all this documentation would be validated by an independent validator. And then the airlines could refer to this independent validation when approving devices. The device manufacturers would benefit from it a lot, as it would be a consolidated approval, and instead of running different approval processes with multiple airlines, it could be all centralized. It would also have significant benefits for the airlines, as they could rely on a trustworthy independent validation, and it would ease the approval process for them as well. In terms of the timelines, for the central database and the pre-validation process, we are currently concluding a market assessment where we are collecting feedback from the industry in order to understand if there is a need for these proposed services. We are going to conclude this by next week, and if the feedback is positive, then we are going to start working on defining the functionality, and we will start developing the central database, and we will also define the process for the pre-validation. In the meantime, we are working on improving the recommended practices and defining standard operating procedures. Any updates would be published by let's say by the end of the summer, or latest by the end of September. We are running pilots through the whole year. And towards the end of next year, we will start to facilitate additional discussions to be able to identify further business needs for cargo interactivity. And this was my presentation. Thank you very much, David, and I would hand it back to you.
Right. Thank you, Nicole, for the insightful sharing. So we are ahead of time, which is good. So coming up next, we will have David South, Senior Manager, Digital Cargo, and Christoph Lambert, Project Manager, Digital Cargo, to explain to you the one record concept and how it can support the industry to modernize cargo distribution. So David and Christoph.
Hello, David. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us today. I'm here with Christophe Lambert as well next to me. Today on this session, we're gonna have a much more detailed look at the one record standard as introduced by Henk. He shared the high-level view on the different concept and benefits. Here we're going to look at the concept itself. And Christophe will go through one of the use case using data sharing for cargo distributions. So as introduced by Henk, the one record concept is to have a virtual shipment record. And to achieve this objective, we have defined 3 pillars. So the first one is defining what are the different pieces of data that we want to exchange with our business partners. And then the second pillar is to define how we can have access to these data elements through the use of standard API. And then the third one last but not least, is to define with whom I want to do business with in a secure manner, and it will define the security mechanism that needs to be in place in the One Record environment. So as you have seen, the One Record standard is a standard that is data-centric model compared to the legacy one that is document-centric. And by having a model that is data-centric, we can have a better visibility, transparency on the different data elements and data flow. We will definitely improve the data quality by avoiding all of the duplicates and all the different confusion that can come with the data with the document. And by doing that, we will improve the whole data flow from a holistic point of view. So One Record aims to cover the end-to-end supply chain, and therefore when we design the data model associated to it, we wanted to cover all the different areas of cargo. We studied what we called the airline core ontology that will basically covers all the transactions between forwarders, carriers, and customs authorities. And on top of this airline core ontology, we put some add-ons that will cover additional features. So for instance, we can have the shipper's letter of instructions, but also we can have specific areas for dangerous goods or pharmaceutical product. Ildiko just shared a piece of what we could do with IoT data through the Interactive Cargo project. And we will also have other type of elements such as advanced cargo informations for pre-advanced declarations, as well as anything related to have more visibility on CO2 emissions, ULD tracking, ground handling operations. In this presentation, Christophe will focus on the cargo distributions to show you how the use of data sharing can be applied to that activity. When we designed this standard, I think that the main objective was to get closer as possible to the reality of the cargo, and therefore we decided that the One Record standard would be piece-centric, and this is a major change compared to the legacy system that we have today, which is shipment-centric. The advantage of having a model that is piece-centric is that we can better manage all the information at the tiniest or the finest granularity, which is the piece that is tendered either from the shipper to the forwarder or from the forwarder to the carriers. Also, as I mentioned, the model is physics oriented. It means that we want to have a digital twin of the reality, whether it is about the shipment itself through the different pieces, the ULD, the transport means such as aircraft, truck, or even the different type of locations. The model is, of course, data-driven, and the main also concept is that the data is made available by the owner of this data. And as such, we can achieve one single source of truth, meaning that only the one who know what should be the data can make it available for the rest of the supply chain. So as I mentioned, this model is piece-centric, and by piece, what we mean is a uniquely identified physical single unit, which may form all of part of a shipment. So really, this is the smallest physical unit that cannot be split, and that is tendered from one party or another. So here I mentioned about digital twins, and we can have here as an example ULDs, airplanes, and the idea behind is to really be able to translate into the digital world what exists in the physical world. So here, just to focus on what we mean by single source of truth. It means that we have a clear ownership of the data. The data owner defines who can have access to this data. It ensures that the data is accurate, that we can ensure data integrity, and that will create a trust between the different stakeholders, as we know that this data cannot be altered without knowing it. So we mentioned that One Record is data-driven and not document-driven. This is the core principle from One Record, and the virtual shipment record will be achieved through the concept of linked data, where you have all the different pieces of data that we can concatenate or consolidate that can lead to the equivalent of a document. But instead of having the document as an input, we have all the data as an input, and we can have as an output all the different documents that may be required. By doing that, we avoid all the redundancy of the data elements, and we resolve all the data quality challenges that we have currently in our industry. So the benefits, the main industry benefits that we will achieve by implementing One Record at a large scale is obviously the data quality and control, as we can have full control over the data. We can decide to whom we can share the data with. Also, the second point is we will get a better visibility, transparency on the data flow and on the shipment in general, as we want to target all the different stakeholders from the shipper to the consignee, including all the different transport operators and customs authorities. This data will be shared again with the relevant parties only through a security mechanism. The third point, and this is something that has been mentioned by Henk as well, is that One Record wants to be a plug-and-play standard, and where we believe that through the use of standard API, it will be easy to connect the different stakeholders. Same as you have with your USB port. If I have a memory stick, for instance, I know that it's going to be pluggable in the computer, and I can directly have access to the data without having to configure something complicated. Fourth point, with One Record, what we want to achieve is to build the future of digital cargo, meaning that you can see the One Record standard as the pipes of a network, and based on these pipes, you can run all the flow or the liquids that you want, meaning that once the industry will adopt the One Record standard, everyone will be interconnected, everyone will speak the same languages, everyone will be able to share information, and then we will be able to focus on the information that need to be shared and to create the value-added services that we can extract from these data elements. Last point, which is pretty important as well, is that, as you know, our industry is pretty conservative in terms of processes, but also in terms of technology. And today the legacy system is still using old technology from the 70s, and we can't expect to attract the young generations in our industry if you cannot offer them technologies, modern technologies, current technologies. So we can't expect that the student today will learn the old technologies that have been developed by our grandparents, and therefore we need to be able to offer to them an attractive working environment with the latest technology. So to support the adoption of the One Record standard, we have developed a series of guidance or supporting materials. We have a dedicated section on the IATA website. So if you type in iata.org/OneRecord, you will have lots of resources. So for instance, you will have access to the One Record implementation playbook. So basically, the playbook is a document that you can see as a checklist to help you go through the main step when implementing One Record. So we have 5 of them that we have identified. The first one is to define a digital business process. The second one is to sign a multilateral data agreement which is very similar to a NDA that you can sign, that you could sign with your business partners. Then once you have done all that, you can go into the actual implementations of the standard. So first, the one record data model, then the one record infrastructure with the APIs and the security mechanism, and finally to start a pilot project with your business partners. In the document, you will find as well some Q&A that will help you to understand the standards. So for instance, here you have Tom and Jerry that are asking questions around the use of the API. At the end of the document, you will have as well a quick checklist that will help you to verify that you have done or achieved the main points to the one code implementation. Also, what we have on the website is a direct link to the standard. If you don't know it yet, one record is a standard that is open and that is publicly available and that is published on GitHub. So on this repository, so either you can have access through the IATA website or directly on GitHub, on github.com/IATA cargo/one-icon. And you will find all the different folders, including the folders May 2022, with the latest standard that has been endorsed by the Cargo Operating Technology Board. And finally, we have also a developer portal, which is onerecord.iata.org, and on this portal you will have all the technical materials. You have also some video learnings, actually that are the link to our past webinars. You will have access to white papers and technical insights, and as well some code samples to start with. I will hand over to my colleague Christophe, who will guide you through one of the applications.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Christophe Lambert, project manager on the digital cargo team. I will have a quick view on the cargo distribution. As David mentioned earlier, we are extending the scope of the one record data model little by little. And cargo distribution is, of course, one of the major topics that we have been working on for the past couple of years. Basically, what we see today is that the customer experience on the distribution side needs to evolve. Customer being mainly the forwarders in our supply chain. What we need to improve is getting to an end-to-end digital journey for the customers, enhancing the self-service as well, and come to reduced lead times, because these are one of the main pain points in today's distribution. Also for that, from a career perspective, the omnichannel sales is not a must-have anymore. It needs to happen because basically customers are asking for digital channels, for APIs, for marketplaces. We've seen recently that lots of marketplaces are basically rising up. APIs as well. Most of the airlines are coming up with their own airlines, but with their own standards. And there's also a need to come up with a digital standard to answer the industry needs and to make sure that everyone can communicate the same way. One record is, of course, one of the main answers that we are trying to reach there. What we need is data sharing instead of messaging standards. And we also need to come up with some standard processes instead of APIs to facilitate the communication between different stakeholders. And as David mentioned earlier, to allow for the plug and play part that we are looking for. What is the vision of cargo distribution product? First, it's getting to know your customers. On the customer side, you need to have some more knowledge on who is your customer. Then the intent as well is to have a more customized and more targeted content to reach to your customer. Here we need a more tailored experience to enhance the customer experience. On the customer side, the customer needs to be able to search, to have some enhanced, I would say, search capabilities, to filter, to compare the different products and services. So for that, we need, I would say, a standard approach and a standard way to communicate what would be, for example, a quote to a customer. We also want to facilitate any online payment. So allowing for the direct invoicing, for example, allowing for the online payment directly within a specific marketplace, within the specific platform, for instance. So this leads, of course, to the electronic invoice. And the important part here is that the electronic invoice should be easily reproduced based on the whole booking part. So here we need to really make the link between the distribution phase and the operational phase, where we can have some discrepancies today. The important part in terms of customer experience is that the customer needs to be allowed as well to share and rate basically its digital journey with the carrier. And then from a carrier perspective, it's really important to be able to manage and monitor any irregularities, any discrepancies in the whole sales and booking process. And as well, instant notification, real time, it's something that we are really trying to achieve by evolving the distribution. For that, we have been working with what we call the Modernizing Cargo Distribution Working Group. We call it MCD internally. Who is the MCD? So it's a working group under the Digital Cargo Working Group governance, under the cargo, the COTB as well. It's basically, we have major airlines contributing, major forwarders as well, and service providers as well. What are the objectives of this working group? We have many objectives. The first one is about proposing a standardized approach of cargo distribution. So here we're already talking about what could be standardized in the process. Of course, anything related to, I would say, internal policies of airlines is not up to standardization at all, but all the exchanges and all the interaction between the customers and the carriers is something that we want to standardize as much as possible. If we want to reach an automation and simplification of distribution as a whole, it's something that needs to happen. All of that, if we use digital standards like one-way card, will allow to facilitate all this automation, all this real-time interaction as well. And the last objective, one of the last objectives, is to design a standard API flow, basically to enable the sales and booking process that has been standardized with the different stakeholders. We have three main deliverables as of today. Of course, there are many other documentation, many other deliverables associated, but the main ones are first the standard sales and booking process, including the cancellation process as well. So here it's really defining what are the main steps and the main interaction between a customer, mostly a forwarder, and a carrier, to come from a quote request to a confirmed booking. So here we have 6 main steps that can be defined in sub-steps, of course, depending on the outcomes. Then we've been also working on what we call the standard commodity descriptions. So here's really to facilitate the exchange between the forwarder and the carrier, because today we all know that lots of forwarders and carriers have some bilateral agreement on how they communicate and what information they communicate. The idea is that tomorrow a forwarder can communicate the same way with multiple carriers, for example. And the last main deliverable that we have is the standard API design. So it's basically a sequence diagram explaining how the sales and booking process can be applied from a more technical point of view using One Record standard. To have also a quick overview of how One Record has been improved and could work for distribution, really in a nutshell. We have on the left-hand side the forwarder, on the right-hand side multiple airlines. The idea for tomorrow is that a forwarder can create one quote request that will be shared to multiple airlines. It can be through the forwarder server, it can be through a booking platform, it can be through directly airlines platform. This is really up to the different stakeholders to decide. And after that, each airline can propose one or multiple offers as a response to the forwarder. And then in the sales and booking process, of course, there can be exchanges between the forwarder and the airlines to fine tune the offers, to select one offer and to transform it into a booking. So here the idea is really to allow for real-time responses, if feasible, also to allow for non-real-time responses if some more, for example, process are required, so some more time is required to build up an offer from a carrier perspective. And as I said, also, the idea with one record is that each stakeholder can host its own server, or can rely on booking platforms or on carrier's platform. Here we have multiple ways of communicating between stakeholders. Really on a quick overview, because here the idea is not to go into too much details, as it's more an introductory presentation on what we do. Just to show you on this slide that we have on one side the operations data and the other side distribution data. On the left hand side, you can easily should be easily able to follow the flow of what we introduced at the digital twin concept. You have the piece at the center, you have the shipment, item, products, and then some, I would say, some subclasses to more define what would be alive animals, what would be dangerous goods, for example. And on the right-hand side, you have the distribution data. Here, what we want to emphasize on is that there is really a difference between what would be distribution data and what would be operations data. On the distribution side, you have all the booking option requests, the booking options, then the booking request and the booking. So here we're really talking about what constitutes basically an offer from a carrier and how the interaction can work out. And you see on the top that we have a waybill object. The waybill really is the link between the distribution scope and the operation scope, where basically the shipment is really defined and is the actual shipment that will be flown. And now I will hand over back to David, talking about the advocacy activities.
Thank you, Christophe. So to support these cargo distribution standards adoptions, we have defined some advocacy activities. We have actually defined three main activities. The first one is the communications through communication materials. The second one is the development of information guides. And the third one is to have a self-service demo package that can showcase the use of one report for cargo distributions. So in terms of communications, we have defined different type of communication materials, different formats. So that would be webinars. So we intend to do this year 3 episodes for the webinars that will help to attract awareness for the different industry stakeholders. Then we would have a white paper that will deep dive into the technical background and implementations of cargo distributions. Then we'll have ad hoc, I would say, articles that will cover a specific topic or specific areas. And then, of course, we'll have a dedicated web page on IATA.org that will provide generic and high-level information, and that will point also to the other supporting materials. The second one, as I mentioned, is the implementation guide. So here what we would have is a comprehensive technical document that would describe the different components for cargo distributions, particularly the data model and the API specifications. We would also, as mentioned and showed by Christophe, have a descriptions of the business model, the business process, the data flow between the different stakeholders. We'll also highlight the required infrastructure and how to implement the standard from a technical point of view. And then we'll have a step-by-step user manual or training materials for the different type of users. Last component would be also what we call the self-service demo package that will come as part of our One Record as a Service platform, where basically we will be able to showcase cargo distribution with One Record that will include scenarios such as quote request, quote response, booking request, and booking response. The objective of this demo package is to showcase what can be done from both a front-end and back-end point of view. In terms of timeline, these activities will be spread over the next, I would say, 12 months, where basically we will have over the next months different white papers or articles that will be published along with the different webinars. We expect to be able to have the demo package ready by the end of the first quarter of 2023, so that we can start to communicate on them and to distribute and showcase this demo package to the whole industry starting from March 2023. And then also based on the demo package and based on the different standard components, we will develop the implementation guideline that should be available for the industry somewhere between the second quarter of the year 2023. So I think that was it for our session on One Record and cargo distributions. I hand over to you back, David. Thank you very much all.
Right. Thank you, David and Christophe, for the insightful sharing. So coming up next, we will have Arnold Lemberg, One Record Engagement Manager, to share with you the hackathon winner solutions and how you can participate in the hackathon. So Arnold.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let me just. So yes, so we're a bit in advance. So what I'll do is I'll talk about the hackathon, but just before, which is also part of my work, is to talk about the pilot projects which I lead. So just to let you know, we just heard about the data model, both from the One Record standard and also from Interactive Cargo. And the way it is with the pilots is there's always a continuous improvement. So we have the pilot groups. They give some feedbacks on the testing and the fine-tuning of the standard. They bring that back into the data model task force. They work with the API and security task force as well. And then it's a continuous loop to always improve. So it's always a work in progress. I've added a few of the participants just so that you get an idea and a flavor of how many companies are involved. We're currently at over 200 companies. I have the link here at the bottom, which will take you to our page dedicated to the pilots, where we have all of the participants, so you can have a better look and understanding. And just to give a small perspective, we actually have, as Henk mentioned right at the beginning, we have two concentrations, mainly in Europe and also in China. We have a pretty good presence in Asia Pacific, but yes, it would be really good to have even more participants. And just let you know, I have the link here, which will take you to the participants and also to the use cases. So we have all the use cases, and we have the previous ones as well that they worked on. And I'll go more into details just in a moment, but just to let you know that all the information is here and can be accessed at any time. One of the ones in Asia Pacific was done with CCN, of course, which is also a guest speaker today, and Turkish Cargo. And I really liked their tagline is the journey towards digital cargo begins with one small step in One Record. And the advantage of these pilots is that you work with the participants that you wish to work with, and you test the functionalities of the data model that are most important to you with the partners that you wish. So there is more traction, there is better dedication because you work with the people and the elements that are important to your priorities. As well, we don't fix schedules on the pilots. Therefore, it can be started and ended at any point of time in the year. It doesn't have to start on 1st of January and finish on 31st of December, and it can go as long as you want. And you test, basically, you can do bite size, you can do the whole data model in one go. We're here to support you. We can get participants, we can find stakeholders for you. But yeah. Another one is as well with CCN and with Singapore Airlines, and this is actually preparing the world for the new tomorrow, whereby they're integrating existing messaging standards and one record. So basically is to get, because with the transition that's happening right now, not everybody can switch over to one record straight away. So here it's all about how can we integrate a partner that is not ready and taking it forward, and then also bringing all that information and lessons learned to the task force, and all of this information is shared. Just to let you know, we do meet once a year, and then we go through what the lessons learned that we did last year, what worked, what didn't work. So just to let you know that we get a lot of good feedbacks, and it's always shared with the whole community. So we can see that on the data model, we had a lot of things working. We also got adoption by some of the customs authorities, which we see is very important on taking it forward. And as well on the API side, on the technical side, there is a lot of things that work. And just to show that it's not always that we only show the good stuff, we also have things that didn't work. The good news is these have been resolved, because this meeting was done at the beginning of the year. So we had a few issues, but the whole point is to share the information and then to bring it back. So. And yeah, to become a pilot, it's free. So join, we're here to help you. So we can help you defining your objectives with some help on finding either an existing one record platform or to build your own and to implement and test your use case. So that's one part of testing the data model. The other part, and the more interesting in my perception, is the hackathons, which is the shortest way to running solution. And with that, I would like to thank as well our two main sponsors that make these hackathons possible, which is Riga Software and PayCargo. Without them, we wouldn't be having the traction that we have right now. So what is a hackathon? A hackathon is actually a composition of two words, which is hacking and a marathon. So it's open to everybody around the world. The last edition was in Amsterdam, which just happened in May. We'll talk more in detail about that. That was a hybrid one, but before we did fully online editions, so that everybody around the world could join. We have different topics. So every hackathon always has a different theme that changes, and within those themes, we do different challenges. We usually do 4 to 5, 6 is a maximum. So basically, when you join the hackathon, you have a wide option of challenges that you can tackle, and you're also not limited to the number. You can do 1, 2. You can even try to do all challenges. It can be a bit complicated, but it's okay. It's also done within 28 hours. So a lot of people think that you have a lot of time. You actually don't. And we'll go more into details, but it's only 28 hours of coding. So it tests and validates some things. We know it won't be perfect. There may be some bugs in the code, but that's okay. As long as overall it does work, that's what we're looking for. And of course, we need to incentivize this. So what we do is we do prize money, with the first prize always being $3,000, and there is a total of 15,000 to be won. So it's worth the effort to join. And as well, it's not just about coding. What we try and do is to help the people. So we're there, we run workshops. So people, if they do have questions, if they want to talk to our developers, to our data model experts, they're there. So they're always on site. And if you want to remotely connect, that's fine as well. We can arrange calls. But it's also it's a learning experience. There's nothing wrong there. There's no failures. We're there to help. And it's basically open to anybody that's interested in offering a solution. So why do we do these hackathons? Well, it gives a platform for people to dare, you know, to do something where you're by yourself, you're by your team. A lot of times as well, if you don't have a team, you can create one on site or online. At the start of the hackathon, we get all the people that don't have a team that just want to participate. I think it's interesting. They're looking for people, and then we put them together so that they can create a team. And yeah, so there is no pressure. You don't need to feel scared that you'll have reprisals, or that your superiors won't say that it's a good idea, that kind of stuff. It's there. You're just by yourself doing the work. The hackathons are also there to lever out the preventers, basically the ones that always say, "Oh, it's not possible. We don't believe in it." These hackathons are basically a quick and dirty approach of creating something. It may not work 100%, but at least it can show something, and then you can say, "Look, it is possible. We've done it." You know, so we can innovate. And then, of course, the whole idea is, once you have that solution, is to continue working on it. Just because the hackathon is finished doesn't mean that you need to stop working on it. You can take the idea, and we'll go into details on some of the winners, whereby they've actually been joining the previous hackathon. So they've been doing 3 in a row. And basically, it's always layers. They always add on top of it because they have something. They just add new functionalities. So yeah, also a hackathon allows people to try and kick off maybe a project that usually in daily business don't get time, don't get budget. So they can go to a hackathon, they can create a solution, and then that they could bring back to their supervisors or to somebody else and say, "Hey, look, this is what I created. Maybe it's worth looking into it," and spending at that point some time and some budget. It also teaches discipline, because you got to remember it's 28 hours. You don't have time to do little sideshows. You can't waste your time. You really have to crack on. And so it does provide discipline, and it also forces everybody to get straight to the point, just to go straight, address the challenge, and move on. So what actually happens? And everybody's thinking most probably, "Oh, it's only work, there's no fun." So what we do is it always starts on a Friday evening to give enough time for everybody to arrive. And what happens at that point is they've had a week to look at the challenges in details, and then they look at what they're going to build, which challenges they're going to address, and what are they going to build. With that, they present it to the mentors, which is basically the IATA staff and some of the sponsors. And then basically they present very high level, because of course you don't want to tell everybody exactly what you're going to do, because they may copy it. But what are they going to build to which challenge? The point of this is to not waste your time. Basically, if you create a solution that doesn't address any of the challenges, then you may be disappointed because you wouldn't win a prize, that kind of stuff. So what we try and do is to make sure that what you're going to build is on track and is potential a winner. We finish off with a barbecue just to have a bit of fun, to relax the atmosphere. Because on Saturday morning, that's when the work starts. So we create workshops, which are optional to attend, where we have our experts, both on the API side and on the data model. And they're there to answer any of your questions that you may have prior to you starting your work. This is where, if you do have last-minute problems, they're there to help you, so that you don't end up the weekend having done nothing. And then, of course, you start coding. At that point, we let you in peace, and you work all night long. Some of them take a break, others don't. And then on the Sunday afternoon, you finish the coding, and then you present to the judges your demos. We'll go into that in detail a bit later. And at that point, that's when we have the prizes, and then we reveal the next hackathon. Before, we did only 1 hackathon a year. Now we've moved to 2, because A, they're very popular, and we're seeing that there's a lot of interesting topics that can be addressed. The idea is there's always one in Europe, and then the other one is around the world, and we're looking, and hopefully we'll come to Asia very soon, because I think there is a lot of potential there as well. And of course, we need to reward the people. So if you're on site with us, we provide the food and beverage the whole night, the whole time. So, yeah. So teams, how do you form them? Well, it's a minimum of 2. The reason we do that is because we want to make sure that you can create a solution by being yourself. It's possible, but then it's very, very tough, because you got to build a solution, but at the same time, you also need to present it. So you need to be able to address the judges, to show what you've done. And if you're by yourself, that can be very, very challenging to do both. And then, of course, to make it fair, and we don't want people to come with a team of 50 people, we set a maximum of 6, which is a mix of developers and business experts. Now that we've gone into a hybrid format, we allow people to be anywhere. So you can have part of a team that's on site, part of a team that's remotely. That's totally up to you, as long as the maximum of 6 is adhered to. And of course, you don't need to have any experience. A hackathon is all about having fun and to learn. So even if you've been to many hackathons, you're always learning. And if you've never been one, you're welcome, and you won't be looked down upon. Yeah. So just to give a bit of idea, the last hackathon was actually in Amsterdam at the Startup Village. So we put on a few pictures, and because we have a bit of extra time, there's a little video at the end just to give you a bit of a flavor. And what we try and do is always go to unique places to make it interesting and to make it fun for the people. So this was done on the weekend of May 20th to 22nd. And we actually got a lot of solutions. So what I've done is in the presentation, the slide deck that David will send out later, you have all the links. We're not going to go through all of them, but the idea is we use DevPost, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it before. It's basically an online platform for hackathons. So that's how you host it. And what happens is the submissions of all your projects are done through that. You have all the rules, you have all the participants, that kind of stuff, and it always stays there. So basically what happens is, even though you've submitted and the hackathon is finished, like I alluded to before, you can continue working on the solution. You can still resubmit, you can do ideas. And then when you do that, it comes back to us and we can help you. Or if you have a problem and you want to find a solution, you can message us, that kind of stuff. So the 2020 hackathon and 2021 were fully online. I put the links here for you guys so that you can access them and have a look. But what we'll do is we'll go to the one that happened in Amsterdam. And it takes you straight here. So basically, you can see that there was 141 developers. So it is quite a lot. We were about we were 83 on site. Then you can see all the rules, how it happens. You have all the logos, everything. And of course, you have the requirements of what you need to do, use the challenges, and the submissions, what you need to actually present. And of course, we have the prizes and who are your judges. So as you can see, we have always a big diversity in terms of companies. So this last one was together with the Maritime to show about multimodality. So we all had some maritime people from Port of Rotterdam. We had from DCSA, which was one of the main sponsors. And they also, at each hackathon, if you join on site, you get these really nice polos, which change every year. So yeah, you have to come. So moving along to the project gallery. And this is where you can see all of the ideas. And the good thing is, actually, you may not have seen it, but in Henk's opening presentations, he actually showed about Container Mesh and Lahab, two of the winners. And I'd also like to point out that we had Champ Philippines actually send 2 teams to Amsterdam to take part, and one of their teams won. But we'll just go into one of them. The idea is for you guys to look at your own pace and to have a look at all of these winners. And then the idea is you can see the video because they all have to submit a video on how it all works. I'm not going to play it now, but you can see who are the team members. And then they answer some of the questions. So what is their solution? What does it do? And then so which challenges did it address? So in this case, as you can see, they decided to do 3 challenges, which is quite a lot. And the advantage of DevPost is it's still online. So you can still play with it. You can still go into the system. You can play around. You can have a look at it. You can go into the system and change things. You can play around, that kind of stuff. So that's for everybody to do. So yeah. So then and it's always different things. So with the Lahab, we're talking about the Cargo IQ milestones basically. We also had a team from Frankfurt, which all did about the security and basically doing the electronic consignment security declaration through the One Record standard. So they had a whole, and this was a really good cooperation because it was not just Lufthansa, but it was also a trucking company, IT provider, and Fraunhofer, which is a research institute. So they did a lot of that. And the thing is, you can always get in touch with them if you want to learn more. And yeah, you can have a look at it. They tell you how they build it. Well, yeah. So moving along, I have a little video for you, just to give you a bit of a flavor of what actually happened. So yeah, and as alluded to by Hank, the next one will be in Toronto, kindly hosted by Air Canada Cargo. And we can also give you another sneak preview because it will be announced later on this week, the date, which is 21st to 23rd of October. I know it's in Canada. We're still doing it in a hybrid format. So if you do want to join, and you're more than welcome. The time difference may work against you, but you're also more than welcome to join us in Toronto. And we look forward to seeing there or to collaborate with you even online. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Arnold, for the insightful sharing. We definitely look forward for the hackathon to come to Asia. Right. So moving on, we will now go into the Q&A session. So you're free to type in your questions in the Q&A panel. And just want to highlight that, this is a new feature that we are trying. If you look in your Teams, you will find that there's a Q&A icon. So click on that and post your question there. Or feel free to raise them also verbally. But when you do that, please use the raise hand button. And as before, we will give priority to people asking questions verbally to facilitate a better flow. So now I open the floor for any questions that anyone have.
Can a GSA be accredited?
I get a questions from Man N. Can a GSA be accredited with IATA? Not very familiar with your question. Can you elaborate a bit more, Man? Is this relating to digital cargo or this is something else? Still not very clear. Are you referring to the hackathon or one record? I'm not very sure about your question. Well, what I suggest is then, I mean, feel free to contact me after the webinar. Probably we can have a chat on this if you're not comfortable to talk about it. So, man, I saw an answer from Hank saying that GSA can still work with us on our various program on digital cargo at Hackathon. Does that answer your question? Right. So we got that answered. Right. Seems like we don't have further questions. I think that's fine really. Because the whole session or the whole idea of bringing up this webinar is really. Oh, we do have one. It's by Hermes Shaman. In live tracking, can we have auto milestone update? Just asking.
Yeah, to answer this one. So here the idea is to have a standard way of requesting quotes, one quote for different airlines, so that forwarders can receive back answers, standardized answers from different airlines, and that will help the forwarders to make comparison on the structured way, structured informations. And that's why we want to have standard APIs and standard data model, so that whenever we issue a quote, all the different airlines will receive the same, and forwarders will receive the answer in the same way. So then we can imagine that in real life, either you have a direct connectivity between a forwarder and different airlines, or you can imagine that a platform provider would use the OneRecord standards to implement in their platform to facilitate communications between forwarders and airlines. Does it answer the question?
All right. Anyway, Hamish, I hope that answer is good for you. We're going to look up to another questions that we have. It's coming in through the chat though. So questions on one record. The idea about to make the request of the price and support sending to all airlines. Could you please share more logically for the real life on this idea? I suppose this question is on distribution. If Christoph can take these questions in the chat by Wasini Chem.
So this is exactly just what I described actually, is that here the idea is to use the OneRecord standard to facilitate all this interaction between the forwarders and the carriers in a standard way.
So there's a follow-up question. Yes, Christoph, please.
And then the follow-up question is that yes, when we will implement the OneRecord API for distributions, carriers will be able to integrate their inventory so that we can know the space available and they can respond accordingly to the customers.
And I just want to add one thing on that. The difference we have with OneRecord is that we're talking about data sharing and not sending messages, meaning that in this kind of use case, one forwarder can create one quote request and share it to different airlines. It doesn't have to send, as in the existing world, the same message to all airlines. It has to share basically his data to all the airlines, and then the airlines are free to to collect the data, to analyze them, and to propose answers. So that's the idea that we have behind one record. And then all the GSA or CSA, I think any stakeholders can enter into this chain. And it also comes up with the one of the things that Henk and David presented earlier about the security and the trust, meaning that you as a data owner can select who can access your data and who you want to share it with.
And also on the GSA and CSA topics here. So here the purpose of One Record is not to change the way people work today in terms of stakeholders, but here the idea is to add a digital channel to the sales process.
So thank you, David and Christophe. Let's wait for a while to see if we have any question. There's another question from Harish. Let me publish this question. So in the earlier question, it was mentioned that in live tracking, can we have auto milestone update? And I think the question is relating something quite similar to Cargo IQ, which is the mention of handover to airlines or ETA or ETD or ETA update milestone to customers. So if I understand the questions correctly, this is a bit more relating to interactive cargo. When it comes to live tracking, are we able to push the milestone update of ETA, ETD, POD, and whatnot milestone to the customers? Probably if Idiko, you might want to comment on this question.
Yes, thank you, David. I'm going to take this question. Yes, so I can confirm that actually one of the main objectives of the live tracking is to be able to push information and data automatically. Let it be milestone updates on the location, or let it be any warnings in case there is something wrong with the routing of the shipment, or in case there is a change in the circumstances which are required for a special shipment. So yes, that's the idea, that the live tracking would provide real-time information and auto-populate this data so that the stakeholders have access to all the information real-time.
And just to complement on Ildiko's response, this is the perfect use case where you see the combination between the use of the One Record data model, which by design allow for updates, as Ildiko mentioned, at different level on different elements, and the use of IoT devices that can capture and record this type of change in events. And then whether it is automatically updated or not will depend on how people will integrate these solutions together, and they will be able to define the level of automations that the system will be able to provide. So basically, we as IATA, we will offer and make available the standard from the data point of view, data model point of view, and from an IATA point of view. And then it will enable the different stakeholders to build all the intelligent system that is behind and all the value-added services that can be built on top on this infrastructure.
Right, thank you for that. David Saf, another questions for you from Wasini. If the airlines or freight forwarders are already involved with the e-airway bill, how could they adopt the One Record concept? What should they consider as the first step to go on?
So here, the one recruit, the EAWBIL concept, sorry, remains relevant in one recruit. It is just the way it is done that will be different. So with the legacy system, the electronic airway is materialized through a message, either FWB message or XFWB message that is sent by the forwarders to the carriers. With one recruit, the electronic airway bill would be materialized through the shipment recruit that would be populated by the different stakeholders through the different data elements. So in that sense, it will not change much in terms of process. The main change would be indeed in terms of infrastructure and the fact that we are moving from a messaging way of working to a data sharing way of working. When it comes to the multilateral EAWBIL agreement, this remains in place for the legal framework. So this is really just to implement the one record environment and to engage with the customers that will change. And also we need to bear in mind that one of the objectives of one record is to address all the challenges that we have currently with the messaging standards, particularly when it comes to data or character limitations, data truncations, and so on. I heard that people are complaining because with the cargo AMP, you are limited in number of characters, you can't accommodate all the special link codes and so on. All these issues are addressed with the one record and the concept of data sharing.
Thank you, David. We can take in more questions if there are, since we are a bit ahead of time. I'll just probably wait for another couple of seconds for another questions to come up. Right, if not, I'm going to take on the next part. Right, so I hope you enjoyed the presentations and that you have some takeaways. So before we end this session, I would like to take this opportunity to remind you that we will have new speakers and industry experts to share more on cargo digitalization in our next section, which is next Wednesday on the 20th July. It will be the same time. And I hope to see all of you again. Right, with that, we have come to the end of the webinar. So for those who have still questions, you feel free to engage me through my email and I'll direct them to the subject matter experts accordingly. So I hope to see all of you again next Wednesday. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.